Okay, first of all, to start us off, question for you. Have any of you signed up for a webinar or a podcast, promised the keys to the kingdom, right? And you're excited to learn, you're excited to get some new knowledge. And then you look down at the clock and you're about 20 minutes in and the presenter's still talking about themselves. Raise your hand if you've ever experienced that. I know I have. I'm really tired of it. This is not one of those. Obviously, I'm assuming you know enough about me to have brought you here, and I appreciate it. And I want to have your participation. I see some familiar faces. As a matter of fact, my first coach and my first client. I think that's really awesome. Thank you, Doug and Tony, for being here. This is not a presentation. This is not a one-way conversation where I'm like blah, blah, blah to you and you sit back and you listen. This is a coaching session. So the more you bring to it, the more I'm able to help and the maximum value you get from this session. As you know, the topic is HR and building your team. We have a number of questions that were sent in ahead of time. And so thank you to those people that did that. But I really want to encourage you as we go through this, that if something prompts you, if a question or one of my answers prompts you to think about something you're challenged with right now, either raise your hand visually or at the bottom of your screen in the reactions, you can just raise your hand in that menu, and I will do my best to address all the questions as they come in. We have a diverse audience covering a number of different industries, so my answers will be on a high level, but if we think about HR, human resources, the last time I checked, every business has humans. So there should be a lot of crossover with the strategies and approaches. Okay, so first question that we had sent in ahead of time was, I'm relatively new in my business. How do I navigate the chicken and egg of when to bring on people to help? The chicken and egg. Well, first of all, it's a good problem to have, right? We have many problems in business, but chicken and egg means you're growing and you need help. There is a rule of thumb, and I apologize, my video is going wonky. My internet's been intermittent the last couple of days. For some reason, it's been perfect for 6 months, but I have a rule of thumb that I often share with my clients. I call it the 60-80-100 rule. That is, when you're consistently at 60% of your own work capacity, so the work you're doing with your own clients, it's probably a good idea to start looking. So that by the time you reach 80, and hopefully you've brought on that help, you still have that 20% of capacity to bring them on board properly, give them the effective training, and get them up to speed to the way you want. I've seen far too many times where people wait, just not thinking ahead. They're muddled in the day-to-day work, understandably, right? Taking care of their clients, busy, busy, busy. And then all of a sudden, one day they wake up and they're at 100%, they're at the wall. So where's the time to look for people, let alone bring them onboard them, and effectively train them? Now, I think, Doug, you had a question that's somewhat related to this, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. It's got to do with businesses that have reached the, whether the person was wise enough to follow your 60, 80, and 100 rule, which strikes me as the first time I've heard that. It's actually quite a good rule. It's proactively looking to see what you will actually have time to do
in the future. Exactly.
Right. And so I thought by the time the person's at, so the person brings on the first staff member or whatever at 80% of his time already being built, working on clients and stuff. I've seen people, they just, and you can't work at 105 or 110% of your capacity. 100% is 100%. And if you're flat out, you're pumping the well too hard, and you'll be back down to 80% next week.
Or in the hospital.
Well, yeah, you just can't do it. So I like that. The question I had was from something I've seen happen with small growing businesses, is people, and I've seen it in bigger businesses, of people hiring folks who top out, right, fairly quickly as your business grows. They reach a size, the business reaches a size where that person's thinking and operations don't fit what the business needs, right? And I've seen this in some 150 person, 200 person home building business where it got to the point where the HR person needed to let go of the, I'm going to get to know everybody approach, right? And really went for more systems and process oriented thing, because she could not, with the best will in the world, do what her old methods required. And I could see this showing up in our coaching sessions with all kinds of, little failures on that front. And so you take that back down to a smaller business. How do you select for someone who can stick with you until you got like 20 people? You know what I mean? Like,
okay, really good question.
Capacity.
I love that question, actually. It's because it's one of those, it's along the line of chicken and egg, right?
It is.
And it's like, I always say to my clients, the HR facet of your business is like putting a puzzle together, right? Not all the pieces. In fact, no one piece is the same size and shape as the next piece, right? So generally speaking, in startup, and that's a really big challenge, because I've actually helped people, owners of smaller firms, when they realize their staff have topped out. They've served them well. They've been excellent staff, but they've reached their limit and they cannot grow, or will not grow, or won't grow, right? For whatever reason. So the first thing I want to say is, when you're looking at bringing people on in any stage, startup being one of the most important, but at any stage, is theoretically, let's use startup as your example, right? Theoretically, you've gone through a business planning process. And theoretically, in that business planning process, you've gone through a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, the old school around SWOT was pull up your socks and focus on your weaknesses. Come on, get to work. What are you doing? Now, I have to admit, I'm old enough to know old school, and I followed it in the 80s and 90s because it kind of made sense. We pick up our weaknesses and all of that. Then along came Steve Jobs, and he turned that theory upside down. And his theory, which I support 100%, is you as the business owner or leader. And again, this is applicable whether you're startup, you're mid-level, you're working in a company as a leader. This is HR, so it's generally across the board. Look at your own SWOT analysis and build your team accordingly, so that you're building effectively a team of people that are not only taking care of the holes left by your weaknesses, but they're almost always 10 times better at those tasks, and they enjoy them. Now, if you do that, Doug, my feeling is that those people are going to be more open and willing to grow with the business. Because as Jim Collins says, one of my favorite books, Good to Great, get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seats. And if you follow that formula, nothing's guaranteed, right? No, there is no perfection. We are humans. We will never be perfect. I know I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. I strive for excellence, but I long ago gave up striving for perfection. But if you look at either the SWOT of the individual or the SWOT of the organization, and look to build your team systematically around filling those weaknesses, you're going to have an amazing team. And Steve Jobs was well known, tough leader, tough boss to work for, but he built some outstanding people around him. And look at the legacy he left, right? When he passed, the company didn't go under. The company has thrived ever since because of the team, the leadership, and the team he built. That leads me to that second part of that question. It really has a lot to do with the leadership, right? Whoever is at the helm has to take the time. And often in startup, people are rushing. Oh, I gotta get help. Or I gotta do this all myself. There's a rush sense, right? Which I also understand. I've been an entrepreneur. I'm in my second business in my career. So I understand startup, but it really is about getting the right people and then getting them in the right roles. Does that satisfy that question?
I think it's a nice articulation of it, right? For me, what I think where a person would get a handle on this is focus on your own SWOT, look at your weaknesses, and remember that everybody else has something like that. And then you build a team full of people who do what you can't.
Yeah, and put the puzzle together, right? Based on strengths. Yes,
Yeah, and these are people who can do what each other can't do.
exactly. Because we're
Yeah.
not all I mean, we're not all the same. And one of the things I see, and I understand it's hard because as people, as human beings, we want to press the easy button. Thank you, Staples, for that. There is no easy button, really. And there is no one size fits all, especially when it comes to HR, right? We're all individuals. We have strengths, we have weaknesses, we have things we like, we have things we don't like. And if you spend the time putting people together, like truly as a team, I mean, if you look at sorry, I'm a baseball fan. I say sorry because not everyone's into sports, but I always think of putting a team together, right? You don't put the pitcher on third base. You don't put the outfielder as in the catching role, right? And you certainly don't, often put a first baseman on the pitching mound. But so often employers want to kind of cookie cut, boom, 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 boom. Everybody's the same. We just want to put people into the same place, fit them whether they fit or not. And that's why I really loved your question, because it's not only at startup, it's at any stage of the business cycle, any growth stage. And I think that's why, there's been so much talk about HR, the Great Resignation, all of that over the last couple of years. And I love studying this because as opposed to, in addition to business, I'm a fan of history. I'm a student of history. Whenever anything on the level of COVID comes around as a major disruptor, it flips everything upside down and people reflect. So this Great Resignation was no surprise, in my opinion. You have many of these people in these roles that they're not suited to, chugging along, paying the mortgage, paying the car payments, paying the tuition for their kids, whatever their responsibilities are. And then all of a sudden, they come to this reflection point and they're looking around going, where am I? What am I doing? Right? So it's also two-sided because you want to make sure that the people you're bringing on are happy in their role, right? So you're not only taking care of the organization from a SWOT analysis, filling those holes, weaknesses, building the team, but you're also bringing on people who are happy to be there, wherever there is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've noticed, because I've worked a lot in situations where people are new to a position, right, and they have to gain credibility. And you're pointing to something I've seen over and over again, is that the way you ingratiate yourself with people or get to the place where they will really follow you, and you're new, or they're new and they got to follow you. So you help them win.
Yeah.
If Steve Jobs was hard to work with, and so is Elon Musk, but he positions people to win big time.
Well,
and people will put up with an incredible amount of stuff if they're getting to win.
You know what, that's all about onboarding too, right? Because as I brought up, Jim Collins has the first two steps: get the right people, get them in the right roles. But then what you have to do is properly onboard them, welcome them, make sure they know that they can come to you at any moment for help. That it is not like, I've seen this problem too, where, because you just brought up the point of someone new in the role, right?
Yeah.
And most people will try to be the lone wolf. They'll feel intimidated to go to their boss, thinking they have to figure it all out on their own. I've seen it over and over and over again. In fact, I've been hired by leaders to help their juniors get over that lone wolf attitude. Because even as, say you're a leader, you've got a new person on board, and you say, Linda, I want you to succeed. If you're having any issues, if you have any problems, if you're having a challenge, please come to me. My door is always open. Yeah. Once is not enough. You have to keep drilling it into their psyche, because we've been brought up that we have to figure it out on our own. We've been brought up to believe that we have to figure it out. And that culture will not succeed. That leads to culture. I mean, this goes all over the place, right? HR goes all over the place throughout the whole organization. And you're right, you have to set up people to win, to succeed. And part of that is letting them know that you're open to help them learn. And then if you don't have what they need, you work with them to find out where to get it, right? To help them develop. Because if you brought the right people on and you got them in the right roles, it's in your best interest to invest in their development so you keep them. And going back to your original question about startup, that's how you're going to do your best to ensure your people are going to stay with you as you grow. I mean, you can only do so much, right? And I always say to owners, do your best, do everything you can, and realize at the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings. And you could do everything possible on the planet, and they may still move on, or they may still not be the right person. But I always believe in shooting for the best, right? And, you know, a lot of my clients hate this. They hate HR. When I started out as a coach, it was all about marketing, business development, bringing in clients. And over the last few years, it's really transitioned to leadership and HR, because those are the issues facing most businesses today. It's about the people part of the business, which I jokingly always say is the most complex part of the business. I don't believe there's a computer yet that is complex as the human brain. And then you add on generational differences, cultural differences, a whole bunch of stuff. So it's fun. I mean, I enjoy it, but a lot of my clients do not. It's a big headache. Okay, so we'll move on. So a couple more new people joined. We're just having a conversation. This is a coaching session. It's not a presentation. If you have a question, if you're hearing something that sparks a thought or a question, please post in the chat. We'd like you to get as much as you can out of this session. So next question is, how do I overcome the fear of growing? Okay, that's a good question too, because I've actually experienced a lot of, and we go into startup, someone going out on their own, and they're getting to a point where it's like, okay, what am I going to do now? Am I going to stay on my own, or am I going to grow? And one of the things I've seen is that fear creeps in on such a large level that I've seen clients refer clients out rather than bring people on. And so I guess, how do you overcome the fear? Well, first of all, know where you want to get to. You know, it's not my job to judge you whether you want to grow or you want to stay on your own. If you want to stay on your own, that's great. You don't have to grow, but overcoming the fear of growth, I would say, is you need to take a real longer term look at what you want to do with your business, with your career. You know, when I was 25 and started my first business, my father was self-employed, and two of his colleagues who he had worked for, both of them, had gone on to build two of the largest design houses in Toronto. And I asked my dad, I go, Dad, why didn't you go like that route? And he said, because I love doing the work. He was a graphic artist. I love doing the work. I don't want to manage the people doing the work. I didn't get it then. I was 25. I wanted to be king of the world. But I do get it very much. And so you have to ask yourself, what do you want? I mean, not everybody wants to grow. You don't have to grow. It's your career, it's your business. So I think you really have to dig deep and find out what it is where do you want to get to? There's nothing wrong with having a solo career in whatever business you're in. You know, I know many people who are out on their own, and they're still out on their own, and they're very happy. They make a good living, they have a good lifestyle, and they're happy. So I guess overcoming the fear. Well, first of all, do you want to grow? And then if you do want to grow, putting a plan together, and that will help with the fear. Next question. Okay. What advice do you have about ensuring I bring on the right people? Again, we can only do our best, right? And there's so much psychology out there. There's different tests that people do, and HR does all that kind of stuff. For me, it comes down to skills and attitude. And again, fitting those weaknesses, right? You've done your SWOT, you know where you need to fill the holes. So the next step would be looking for people that have those skills, okay? Not necessarily experience, but they have the skills. And even more importantly, the attitude. I remember early on, probably in my second or third year of coaching, I read this article about a top tier law firm in the US, AmLaw 100 or AmLaw 200. So we're talking about the most prestigious law firms in the United States, which are pretty much the most prestigious law firms in the world. And they had a hiring policy. they skipped the top tier law schools automatically. They wouldn't even look at an applicant. They went to the second tier law schools and they skipped the A students and went to the B or B plus students automatically. What they found was that those B students at second tier law schools were actually working to pay their way through law school. And this showed them work ethic, determination, discipline, and attitude. Those people ended up being their best hires. So those are a couple of tips that I can give you to help you ensure you're bringing the right people on. Again, we're never going to get it 100%. I haven't seen 100% win rate. Why is HR so hard? Because it's about people. Like I said earlier, people are complex, right? There's many similarities, right? Obviously, but especially in today's day and age, you have what, four different generations, maybe 5 in the workforce right now, and all of them are completely different from each other. Then you have the turmoil caused by COVID. Then you have the great resignation. Then you have this is complicated stuff. A computer program is far easier, right? Signing an office lease is easy. There's a bunch of easier things in business. I think HR is so tough because it's the people part, which I've always said to clients in an off the cuff way, is the hardest part of any business. How do I ensure my people are in the best place for them, the firm, and the clients? Well, this kind of all is related. It's about making sure, A, you get the right people from the beginning. B, you take the time to get them in the right roles. And then C, with the onboarding and training, you're in regular communication with them, giving them feedback on a regular basis and helping them in their learning and development. Doug, did you have a follow-up to that? You're muted. Oh, there you go.
I just unmuted myself.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that, what do you think? I'm going to ask them to answer that question with a question to you. What do you think of bringing people on in the first instance as contractors rather than as employees to whom you have certain legal obligations? Well, so they get time to prove themselves, right? Beyond the statutory period.
I think it's a fantastic idea, as a matter of fact, and especially if you're at that startup stage or you're just going from solo to starting to bring people on, right? And I wanted to bring that up from the very beginning because that 60, 80, 100 rule definitely applies to bringing virtual people on, contract people on. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to bring on full-time people, right? And the beauty is there's a lot of people out there that don't want full-time. They'd love to be on contract because they're also self-employed and they may have 2 clients, right? I like the idea very much because it does give the opportunity in a respectful way for the employee to prove their worth to the employer. It also lessens the risk for the employer, right? And you brought it up with the legalities of employment, the financials, all of that. So I think if you get the right people who want to be in a role like that, I think it's win-win. That's a good question. So thank you.
And just to carry on just a little bit further, what do you think of then graduating them to full-time employee? Because contractors do think a bit differently from employees. You know, they're built a bit differently. And what you're going to need, and see, I'll just say a thing that I believe is true, which is you can go only so far with a virtual team because people need to actually be in the same room together to really gel. And so how would you graduate from virtual employee to, you know what I mean, in-house, people breathe in the same air kind of situation?
Well, first of all, I would say it would have to start with a conversation with that employee. And then second of all, looking at your business model, do you need full-time? Right? Well, make sure you need full-time. Is that employee interested in moving, or that contractor interested in moving to a full-time position? You know, because if not, that conversation's mute. But I would like to challenge you on one thing, and we can maybe open that up as a conversation, because
Yeah, I know what's coming.
there's been a lot of discussion about this. I want to challenge you on, and what timing, eh? My video's screwing up just as I'm going to talk about virtual versus
Right.
in person. Thank you,
Yep.
Universe. I want to challenge you on that, because I've seen both sides, and obviously there needs to be some team in-person effort, systems. I've seen this with a few clients. I saw a post yesterday or today on LinkedIn about this company successfully working virtually, and then they brought their team together for some, not the old typical 1980s blah 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 team building crap where everyone's sitting there rolling their eyes for like 8 hours. No, they brought them together for some genuine team building exercises. So I'm not convinced. I think the jury's out, actually, on, do we need to bring everybody back into the office full time all the time? I'm convinced. I'm not convinced that that is the route, because I think the most important thing is that you have happy people. And we've dealt with this in the legal industry for years, the whole FaceTime thing. Personally, because I have virtual people working for me, I don't care where the work's done, as long as it's done. I don't think the clients care where the work is done, as long as it's done. So I'm open, and I know you almost like threw that out for discussion, which I appreciate.
I think the point of entry for me on this one is a young man I know who went deeply into debt on what is one of those online marketing kind of companies,
Okay.
finding prospects for people and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And he went hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt, and what he found was his company was able to generate lots of sales, but consistently blew it on the fulfillment side. And we couldn't get his team to do what he wants them to do. And what I saw as the flaw was that he didn't have experience in leading teams, period.
Right, exactly.
And I, because I was just a little thing I know about you is your extensive experience in politics and in political organizing and so on. You've been around a lot of building of teams of volunteers, which is particularly challenging. So you come to this with an existing background of real world experience in building and running teams, so that you don't have to learn about team while you're trying to manage a bunch of cats, you know what I mean, who prefer to be contractors and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think it may be that what really counts here is what kind of body experience does an entrepreneur need to have in building and managing and leading teams?
Leadership, absolutely. Yeah.
How do you become that sort of person, and how do you get, because every leader I've met who's been really effective has been a very good manager.
Right.
And there's this leadership versus management thing is a superstition. It's how would I put it? I'm just saying, so the question is now graduated in my speaking here to, okay, how do you become a leader who can successfully manage a virtual team? Okay,
so I think what we'll do with that question is we'll hold that off to next month's session, because I had planned on doing a session on leadership.
Okay.
So I think that, because that's a fantastic idea, but I couldn't agree with you more, because I see, let me give an example. A client, one of my favorite, longest running clients, very successful, not the biggest in Toronto, but very well regarded, very respected. By the end of 2020, he had his firm completely virtual. He sold the property where the bricks and mortar were, because I interviewed him for an article I was writing, early 22 or late 21. I can't remember, it's all a blur. Anyway, it was fascinating to hear him go through the motion of how they got to virtual, because what they realized throughout 2020, when we went through the lockdown and then extended and all of that, is that not only the staff started, I mean, once they worked out the tweaks, I worked through with a number of clients through 2020. So I understood they had to work through the tweaks of working from home, right? I've been working from home for 17 years, but I remember those early days, and it's a different animal. I get it. Anyway, what he realized by the end of 2020 was that the clients were enjoying the virtual experience as well, because they weren't having to drive to the office. And so there's all kinds of things, but that guy is a consummate leader. He's a leader in his industry. He's a leader in his firm. He's built an amazing team over the years, and he continued to add to the team. I got to work with a couple of those people in 21. And so he went from 30 years in business, bricks and mortar, to virtual in a matter of 6 months to a year. And they're thriving. Now they get together, like we go back to that team building thing. They get together in person, in group, they have events, they do things together, meaningful things. So they keep that together, but he's been wildly successfh virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with a number of clients, helping them to become virtual, because they've been dreaming about that for years. Meanwhile, I've worked with clients, including senior professionals who've been working in the Cayman Islands for 15 years in the winter. You know, so I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about leadership, and leadership is leadership, whether it's in person or it's virtual, right? And unfortunately, in most professional services, leaders get promoted because they're really great at the job, or they're really great at bringing in business. And the firm or the company is like, here, wow, you've done a great job. Now take this group of people on and lead them. No training, no background, no experience. And it's like, well, we got the last couple minutes. So Tony, did you have any questions? Or Charisse, did you have any questions?
Yeah, nothing for me, Gary, just listening to the conversation. And thanks to Doug, some really insightful perspectives there. Very much appreciating hearing Doug's perspectives. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Okay. Well, this was our first, and we always throw things out and try them, right? To see where they're going. So I appreciate you all being here. I'd love any feedback you may have for the next session. And Doug, you kind of led, one of my questions was going to be, do you have any ideas for next month's session? And I think we're going to go with leadership. Maybe you can reach out and help me narrow that down a little bit, because leadership in 40 minutes, I don't know.
You could have a nanosecond for each opinion about leadership.
Yeah. But I love that topic as well, because I'm constantly studying it. I had the fortune of having some pretty great mentors in my life, and I'm still learning it. I love the study of it. It's fascinating to me, kind of like HR. But thank you, everyone. There are a couple of things I was going to mention are not really that much applicable, but just want to thank you for your participation today. It is the first live coaching event that I've hosted here through LinkedIn and Zoom, and appreciate your input, appreciate your contributions, and wish you continued success. Thanks for your input. Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.